Fearless Flight Live, and joining me this evening, as usual, Captain Merrick, First Officer Dieter, and good old Captain Ron. We'd like to welcome you all. Anybody who has an issue with flying, afraid to fly, you know, somebody who is afraid to fly, or you just like to hang around, talk about aviation and airplanes, this is the place that you want to be. So we're glad to welcome you here tonight. And we're missing a couple of our cohorts. Diane is somewhere in what we call the non-revenue hell. She tried to fly using her privileges where she doesn't have to pay, and found out that so did the rest of the world, because COVID apparently is over for many of the people traveling. And last word we had, she was trying to get through DFW to come back to Phoenix here. Eric's nodding his head because we both have lived through that many times. So, our other helper, Elaine, her nephew is on a winning baseball team. So, and they play every Tuesday night apparently. So we're hoping for big things from the Lions. That's the name of the team there. So anyway, so we'll miss them. We'll try to do our thing. Birds of a Feather, great week for Birds of a Feather. We'll talk a little bit in detail. We had a lot of support for Wendy Moy. Wendy got courage out the wazoo. She decided to fly on this special 301 light class that I'm going to do on the 21st with Oliver and Tom. And if any of you are still interested in that, you can let me know with an email to captainron@fearlessflight.com. But anyway, so she lives in LA, and she wrote me. She said, "What do you think about my idea of trying to get on an airplane to fly over to Phoenix to fly with you guys, and instead of driving?" So I said, sounds like a winner to me. I have done that with people. I got about a half a dozen people over the years. The farthest one came from Detroit, Michigan. So keep your fingers crossed. And the reason I mention that is because in the comments there, this has generated more support comments in Birds of a Feather than any other thing that I can remember since we've been doing the Birds of a Feather group. So anyway, lots of support from everybody out there. Thanks for that. And we'll all support Wendy getting over this and getting her wings back. So congratulations on your courage there, Wendy. Okay, so tonight, let's see, look at my notes here. We're going to talk, we got a poll question. I got a little bit of the Captain's Corner talking about exposure therapy. We got some a couple of, just a few questions, a little bit in the aviation news update, and we'll remind you again of the 101 new classes online, and to complement the 101 in-person class that we do at the Phoenix Airport. Okay, so poll question, and we'll talk about this a little bit. I had one of my flyers had a little issue with nausea there, and that comes up quite often. So we want to ask you for your input, whether you're live now or whether you're watching the replay. Drop in the remarks there and tell us, do you experience nausea as a symptom of your fear of flying? Okay. Okay, it doesn't have to be all the time, it can be any time, okay? Do you get nauseous when you fly? Second question, we're gonna break that down a little bit. Do you relate it to the anxiety that you experience or to the motion, okay? And we'll talk about why a little bit later on when we go into that, okay? So let's move on to the Captain's Corner. I wanna talk a little bit about exposure therapy. We've been talking about anticipatory anxiety as being really the primary problem for most of you with airplanes. It's literally fear of being afraid, right? And we've talked in the last couple of weeks about how the fact that anticipatory anxiety is such a problem, because the more you worry about it, the more it worries you. All right, and it's usually much worse than the situational anxiety, which is actually what you're afraid of happening, like turbulence or something like that. And so anticipatory anxiety is what sets most people off. That's why, you know, many people, their fear starts when they're just sitting there contemplating whether they're going to fly or drive, or whether they're going to book a flight or whatever. So we've pointed out that what really gets people over fear of flying, ultimately, the absolute success stories that you hear about are people who gutsed it out and got on the airplane and they experienced exposure therapy. And that is where you normalize that process in your brain, okay? And that's one of the problems with fear of flying, is that it's hard to normalize because for many of you, it's such a rare occurrence, and it's problematic for that. So we got this next slide. I'm sure many of you will identify with that. This is a tarantula spider, and you can find numerous articles online where people went on and or where they were dealing with fear of spiders, and they learned how to overcome it by literally holding a tarantula in their hand. I don't know, we might have lost Peter there, but we'll get the slide up here in just a minute. I know I was telling Dieter and Eric years ago, it was like 1967 or so, I was down in Tucson visiting some folks, and we're driving down a highway about 65 miles an hour, and we noticed that there was a spider in the road, and you can imagine how big that sucker has to be to see a spider. Well, it was a tarantula like this, and so I got out, and they're pretty benign, really, unless they feel cornered or you provoke them or anyway. So this is not a big deal in terms of worried about getting bitten by the spider. But anyways, I got out and we had a jar, put him in there, and he was pretty slow all in all. He didn't move very fast. So that was his bit. It didn't work out well for the spider in the long term. I should have left him alone now. So anyway, we got this graph here, and this is going to talk about, again, reinforce something I mentioned last week, and that is when you look at anxiety over time, you can see it spikes, no matter what it is, that triggers it. And the main thing is, particularly, this was written for anxiety in general, but let's just imagine this is just for people who are afraid to fly. And you all know it heads for the stars right out of the gate there, out of the blocks, and it motivates you to want to get away and get out of that situation, which is problematic for a lot of things, but particularly so for people who are trying to get over their fear of flying. Because if you do succumb to that urge to bolt and get off the airplane, or walk away from the gate, or turn around and go home from the airport without flying, what it does is it sets you up, because you get this tremendous relief from these endorphins that are produced when you say, because it literally makes you feel like you dodged a bullet. So you get that instantaneous rush of that. Now, in a few minutes, you're probably going to feel a lot of shame and embarrassment and regret, if not more dread, only in the opposite direction, that you didn't follow through. But that's why it's so important to fight through those first moments there. And you can see that a common mistake, which we touched on before, is that the anxiety is going to be, it's going to end in catastrophe. And it doesn't. It literally doesn't. And that's when you get into the situational anxiety, and you find that it goes away rather rapidly, because the bark is never should I do it the other way? The bite is never as bad as the bark. Maybe that's the way to put it. I don't know if that's an appropriate metaphor there, but anyway, and the exposure to the feared object, which is where you get the benefit. That's why we're talking about exposure. It's because you learn through habituation. You do it more and more and over again, and you normalize it. It's just another word for normalizing. So many of you, you've been in a car and somebody pulled out in front of you, or you're following too close and had to slam on the brakes, and your anxiety spikes. But you know that it went away rather rapidly. And the more you drive a car, in fact, sometimes you get too complacent, like we can do as pilots in an airplane, and you let your guard down too much. But what happens is, the more you do something, the more you normalize that experience. And so that's why exposure therapy is literally how you're going to get over this big time. We want to talk a little bit more about, or not a little bit more, we want to talk about, touch on this thing called risk assessment. I think, Eric, you were talking to me about in Australia, they're toying with the idea of a lockdown.
Just heard that, running back and forth from downstairs with the news going on, with them talking about locking down until mid 2022, and the story was relating it to the number of U.S. citizens there, thinking, gee, if I was going to move or do anything, if I'm going to go home, I better go home now. If they're serious about that. So yes, that was all the detail I got running by the TV.
Yeah. And anyway, there's an article here, and I stole their cover graphic off of that, talking about the difficulty we have making a valid risk assessment. And we usually exaggerate the risk, and they use as a particular example this the problem with I believe it's the AstraZeneca vaccine, where they had a couple of people, 2 people literally, who died from it out of I don't know how many millions of doses there because of blood clots. And of course, what that happens, I had a friend back where I grew up the other day. She raised this on the phone, and at first I didn't know what she was talking about. She said, "Well, yeah, it's 25% and she didn't even have the right group." She said, "I think teenage boys or something, are getting blood clots," and I knew that wasn't true, but I didn't know the whole story until today and yesterday when I was researching this. But anyway, so and the reason it's relevant because of the era we live in, for as much as we've talked about the COVID-19 virus, but it's also relevant for people and how we assess the risk of flying airplanes, and it affects what we remember out of things. We remember things incorrectly. My favorite is people talking about airplane accidents, and one lady in particular, we were being covered by the Today Show, NBC News out of Washington, and they feature one person, and the fearful flyer that they were featuring there had come to class, and they're walking right with her. She's going down the jetway like she's on death row, and she's walking the last mile. And she said, "In this step, I remember this accident. In this step, I remember this accident." And what she had done is she'd combined about 10 accidents all into one, and it was completely distorted. So you have to be careful about putting things together like that. And the other, yeah, go ahead.
Our people combine accidents for us at my advanced age, and then they have the details from 4 of them compressed into one, and we got to pull them apart.
Yeah,
those are like trick questions for us.
Exactly. And one other point I just gonna kind of an update. I can't remember if I touched on the fact that when I got back from traveling a couple of weeks ago, in 2 days, I learned that my primary caregiver that helps me take care of my 95-year-old mom, and the person who subs for her, both came down with COVID symptoms, and they both all of us had been vaccinated and all that. And this might be poorly positioned on top of this other story, but the amazing thing is my mom ended up going to the hospital, but when we got her there, it wasn't because of the COVID symptoms she had. It was because of a urinary tract infection, which is particularly problematic for her and particularly older women with dementia. In any case, everybody survived. My mom came back, and I had some symptoms that developed. Tested 3 times over the time, most recently last Friday, which was the end of the incubation period. And whereas my mom tested positive on the second attempt, mine were negative all through that. So I guess it's a little shout out for the vaccine. I had the Pfizer vaccine, and everybody that we came in contact with in the medical community said, it's a tribute to the fact that it does help. It minimizes symptoms. And then mine were like cold symptoms, like the first couple of days you get a cold, but after about 3 days, it started to diminish. So it wasn't anywhere as lengthy as a cold or anything like that, or not anywhere as severe as well. We want to mention tonight, we started calling it our FearlessFlight Honor Roll. And I had a particular noteworthy success just yesterday. This is from Sean, who was down in Missouri. He hasn't flown in over 2 years. Very disappointed in his failure to be able to fly after a flight that he had 2 years ago. And so we had this little exchange here. He says, "Hey, good morning, Ron." He was trying to go from St. Louis through Houston to what's the name of the city, Eric? Mexico.
Querétaro.
Yeah. Anyway, his girlfriend is from down there, and they were big trip. They had planned meeting her family and everything, and he'd been planning for a long time. He's been working with me for about 6 months on this, and so anyway, so he wrote me, "Good morning, Ron. You hope you're doing well. We're about to arrive at the airport. Anxiety is up as expected." So I love this because he kind of gives us a little how's it going, and I said, "You got this, Sean." He said, and then the next time I heard from him, we just landed. So this is the first flight. He landed in Houston where they had to change planes, and by the way, both of them were on a smaller regional jets, which also added to his anxiety there. And he said, it was all in all, it was a smooth flight. Could have used you on board a couple of times during takeoff and landing, though. And I said, yeah, but you wouldn't get the same satisfaction that you do out of doing it yourself. So more power to you. You deserve the credit, and congratulations there. And then he talked about it, said, thanks again. This would have not been possible without all of you when they landed in Querétaro down there. We're on board for the final leg now, hoping it will be as smooth as the first one. I'll keep you posted. And then he told me all went well on the second leg, just enough minor turbulence to make me somewhat motion sick when we got there, but I'll take it. I was impressed with how well the harmonizer and breathing techniques were working. And these are things we talk about regularly if you've ever done any coaching with me. And no meds. He was really, really gratified that he didn't have to take any meds, but he did get a little bit of motion sickness. So that brought up a story with Eric. Eric, you get motion sick when you fly?
Never. Never.
So what's the story?
So Sean drove that poll question. I thought it was very interesting to say that he says he gets a little queasy, little nauseous from the motion. And so I immediately wondered how many of people watching get some queasiness or nausea from motion, or it's all just pure induced from the anxiety, which is Ron will tell you, it's a totally different thing. Yeah. And I told him I'm an avid scuba diver. I got my Belize hat right there with the fish skeleton. So one time I was out with my idol who has trained me for a bunch of my advanced ratings. He's an IDC master instructor. He's got a bunch of ratings, and I had hauled his equipment back to Hawaii from Phoenix to be overhauled at our shop. And my hero goes, oh man, I guess I should have taken the batteries out of my computers before I sent this stuff. And I'm like, Greggy, you're Yoda, and I'm the other guy, whatever his name was. So we're in the boat, and I'm looking down with my spare kit, putting spare batteries into his computer and popping them out. And I realized with the boat heaving before we're going to go on this dive, I go, man, I'm getting sick.
So what's going on is you're moving your head in two axes at the same time, right? Which is what we have to learn how to not worry about when we're flying. Okay.
Yeah. So I thought if I don't get in the water pretty quick, this is not going to end well. But we got in the water, had a great dive, and discovered through the Tribal Knowledge Network later this over-the-counter product, Bonine, BONINE, with that absolutely knocks any sort of motion-induced nausea completely flat. And they list some possibilities and side effects on the back, but I've never heard of anybody having any of them. Just a little bit of dry mouth, that kind of thing, which isn't a problem when you're in the water. And they have given like 3,000 tablets of this to lab rats before breakfast with no side effects. And now I can be I used to think I had an iron stomach, but after that one time in Hawaii, I go, if we were really pitching, I could feel a little queasy, but that just knocks it utterly, utterly flat. And I have a diving buddy that would always get sick when we would go out before we'd get in the water. I felt so sorry for him. And when he started with this stuff, he just stopped. The motion-induced nausea was utterly crushed by this product.
Yeah. So when Eric was talking about that, we were talking beforehand, there's two kinds of ways that people get nauseated. One is from motion, literally, up and down and move it around. But it's related to, like, imagine you're on a roller coaster and your brain is expecting to see some display in the world, but your eyes are generating another one. And this happens. I used to get sinus headaches and they were not not sinus headaches, but visual migraines. And what would happen is my eyes would have this like nystagmus. And if you've been with us long enough, you know that I've talked about vestibular destabilization. People can have an illness that's related to that, and you can get treated for that. They have some protocols where they put you on a table and they take you through a range of motion with your entire body there. But anyway, if you have the one that's generated by the brain not seeing what it expects to see, that can cause nausea. And then the other one is from from anxiety. That one is going to manifest when you are nervous, and it changes the blood flow through your digestive organs. So the one from, where you were in both cases, it might be effective, but whether you're taking Dramamine, which is the long-standing thing out there, or this boning that Eric was talking about, but it may or may not be effective depending on what the cause of that is. So if you have any questions about that, put them in the comments here. And I'll throw this out to Dieter. I don't know if we've had anybody in there comparing whether they think that their motion sickness is related to one or the other there. If you can, just chime in, Dieter. So, okay.
So Michelle, Michelle was quite clear, and she related her, to the motion, not to the anxiety part, but just to the motion part. And then we had a couple others that seemed to say anxiety. So they, so it's a little all over the place. And then Eric, I put a question for you in chat if you want to take that on or not a little later.
I did. I sent it right back.
Oh, well, you can actually just answer it right there.
So since we were talking diving, one of the viewers, I'm sorry, I dropped it. Susan asked right away what I thought of the story about the guy from the Cape that was in the whale's mouth. And,
oh my God!
And she's throwing the BS card down on that, and it sure defies your ability to imagine that. It's within the realm of possibility, but it seems too incredible. But all I said to her was, if in fact that did happen, that I hope as soon as he got to shore, he spent every last nickel he had on lottery tickets too. It
was reported that the whale got nauseous.
Yeah, and that's what he said. The whale's like, yeah, this is not good. I got to get rid of it.
Yeah. All right. And then we had coming in from one of my coaching students here. This is someone who's been very active on the Birds of a Feather group as well, and getting ready to fly in August in kind of preparation for a flight coming up next year, going to Europe, because he's wanted to travel for so long. And again, frustrated. He hasn't flown in a couple of years, and he's just really pissed off because this has reared its ugly head. But he was talking about how he had a funny experience. His wife. He was about to get off the airplane, and his wife was behind him, and so she said, "Honey, come on, let's go." And she kind of blocked his way. And I said, well, that's probably one of the best things that could happen, because again, if you get off, it makes it harder to get back on the next time. But anyway, so he's working on all the techniques and all the strategies that Sean had been successful with, and he's planning on going to DFW from LAX, and so we'll wish him good wishes again when we get there. We'll see him talk about it more on in the groups as we get into August here.
We got a couple of comments on the boning. That's definitely helpful that's definitely helpful for some of our viewers. And Jim, actually, he would know. He goes on cruises, and I hope you can let us know what's your next cruise now that we can all travel again soon.
Yeah.
But he said they give them out on cruise ships, and it seems to be really effective. So
very powerful.
Yeah, I had never heard of that before you mentioned it, Tanya. I heard Dramamine, but not that. So. Okay, we had a couple of things in the news that we'll touch on real quick. The first one, Southwest, I think just today, was that, or over the last 2 days, Eric?
Monday night was the first. Yeah, last night was the first problem, I think.
Okay. And they had a technology problem, and we don't know exactly what that meant, but we do know that what the specifics of the problem it caused. And that was, Eric was talking about the weather package. So you might talk a little bit or address that a little bit, Eric.
So there was a problem. A bunch of flights got delayed and or / canceled on the East Coast. And they called it a technology problem. And evidently what happened was, we talked before about dispatching and the airline company's own dispatch departments that construct flight plans, send them to the pilots for their approval to take off and use. And the parts of this flight plan are the route part. How are you going to get from A to B? The performance part of performance numbers depending on your weight and which runways you're going to use. And then the weather package, which is a significant listing of en route weather conditions, plus conditions for nearby airports, destination, alternates, and off-route airports on the way, and anything that they call NOTAMs, notices to airmen, about navigation facilities that may be working, not working, or reports of turbulence, or reports of weather en route. They're quite significant packages of information. The third part of that, what we call the release, is the whole thing. And evidently the vendor, the person that supplied the weather package to Southwest, that set of information had a connectivity problem. They couldn't transmit it either to the flight decks or to the podiums or flight ops before they were leaving. They couldn't transmit the weather package. And so the good news, the bad news for the passengers was the airplanes didn't go. And the good news for our people is the guys didn't go. They didn't have the information they needed that was required and necessary for the safety of flight, so they didn't fly until they could get the tech bug fixed.
So the temptation, if you have anxiety due to flying, is to look at that and say, oh my God, 500 flights delayed, and were they at risk? But as Eric said, no, it's because they didn't leave the ground, because that package is something that we have to have before we push back from the gate. So you're not at risk for that. And extending it to the next obvious level is, so you're sitting there at the gate, you're all boarded up, ready to go, and nobody's moving. You don't need to worry that the airplane is just found that to be structurally unreliable. No, it's because they didn't get their weather package or their NOTAM package, and so they have to wait for that. We jokingly say in the airline industry, when the weight of the paperwork equals the gross weight of the airplane, you're cleared for takeoff. So yeah, that's what's going on there. The next thing is more of an international incident, and that happened last week. You may remember it in the news. We thought we'd touch on it just briefly. Fortunately, that's one of the reasons why I didn't miss flying pure international sometimes, because the politics around the world. But this is a Ryanair flight that was flying last week, and the head of president of Belarus, I believe, not noted for their integrity and fair dealings and human rights. They had a reporter. They got wind that there was a reporter and his wife who were trying to take into custody, was on this Ryanair flight, and so somehow through the system, they orchestrated a bomb threat. And they ended up landing then, which was the thing that you would do if you have a credible bomb threat. And we won't go into the details, but just because somebody threatens or calls up the airline and says there's a bomb threat on board, doesn't necessarily result in the airplane either landing prematurely or not taking off. There are other criteria there, but this had at least enough of the ingredients to be credible, and so they did land as they should have in Belarus, and then the authorities came on and arrested these two people so unfortunate circumstances, very unfortunate for people who probably had their anxiety triggered through all of this until they figured out that it was okay. So yeah.
That's an unofficial Fearless Flight travel advisory. If you're going to Belarus,
yeah,
better make sure if you're not on any most wanted lists there.
Yeah, and I have to confess, I really do, take an extra little bit of thought about where I'm going to travel in the world and which airlines I'm going to ride on. If you have any doubts about that, again, you can run them by us and we'll give you an opinion.
And I think what really made this story come back into the news again was just because there wasn't a lot of information out for a while. And then Ryanair kind of came under heat for, what was the pilot's decision? And so the real part of the story that I found interesting was that somehow the Minsk Air Control, the ATC, denied the pilot to speak with the Ryanair office in Poland, and just told them that's busy. And so the pilot did what he felt best he needed, and so the CEO of Ryanair was really supporting the pilot and the crew, because people are always like the Monday morning quarterbacks, right? After the fact. So.
And the thing that's most significant about this is a severe breach of the International Civil Aviation Organization agreements, that even during warring parties, they still abide by the commonality, the common rules for air safety. And so this is definitely gonna, you might see some prohibitions against airplanes that are either based in Belarus or want to transit that or land in there. You may see some severe restrictions and maybe economic.
And there is already restrictions in place. Some European, like the European Union as a whole has obviously officially condemned it, but they also have actually stopped air travel into Belarus at this point.
And we had a slide that just shows the route of flight that they took over there, and so somebody planned this out pretty well.
Yeah, so, they definitely did.
Yeah.
So here's that slide there.
Okay, well, that's the formal stuff that we had to talk about tonight. We want to make a shout out again for the coaching calls are picking up. My compliments to all of you out there. You're finding the courage to tackle the problem. I love talking with all of you. So please look in the notes there. Dieter will put the links in there. Feel free to strike up a 15-minute coaching call with me, and it's one of the things that I pride myself in, and we love doing for all of you. So keep it coming. And then, of course, the last thing we want to talk about, again, we want to remind you that if you're anywhere near the Phoenix area for the resumed Clear for Takeoff 101 in-person classes that we have at the Phoenix Airport with Eric and Diane and I typically, make sure that you sign up for that. When you get the link will take you to a URL that it'll say, do you want, the first thing it'll be the in-person class, but don't give up there, because when you click through that, you'll get a choice. Do you want to do it in person or online? And then you'll see the online options there. The next class that we're going to do in person is July 10th. And then we're established kind of a new protocol. The next online class is going to be the next morning, July 11th. We had a great one. I just got the replay out 2 days ago, and everybody seems pleased with that. So please, no reason now that you can't do a 101, a free 101 class like everybody coming to the airport here. We just don't have an airplane to put you in for the thing there. So, okay. I don't have anything else. Eric, Dieter, anything to close with?
No,
well, all I can just say is I'm in awe of Jim's travel plans over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Just go into the comments. That sounds exciting, and I'm totally looking forward to all these travel reports that we will get from Jim. So. Yeah, inspiration to all of us, Jim. And remember when we first met, what an incredible human being you are, and a regular contributor to our funds here. So thanks a lot, Jim.
We live vicariously through our former Fearful Flyers travel photos.
Exactly.
It's a digital improvement above going to Walgreens and looking at other people's vacation photos.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
All right. So thanks again for everybody for coming back and supporting us in the way you do. We hope that you find use and value in this. Let us know if there's things that you want us to talk about that we're not talking about. We really welcome all of your feedback. So on behalf of Eric and Dieter and I, we want to thank you again. Happy landings to everybody out there, and blue skies for this next week until we see you again next Tuesday night. So bye-bye, everybody.